Bills make me wanna shout. Kick your heels up and shout. Throw your hands up and shout.
All right, it's time to talk Buffalo Bills football. Always do it on a Thursday. It's our Bills Insider joining us, Anthony Prohaska from Cover One. Today's broadcast brought to you by our friends at Crest Cadillac. Anthony, good morning. How are you? Bring him on in the stage there, Boy Green.
Doing good.
How are you, sir?
Good. I'm doing good. Thank you for having me. First time we've done this after a loss, but other than that,
We're very sorry.
I
I feel like we should be playing, rather than shout, some funeral music or something. I mean, come on. This team is now 4-1. There's a lot to be down about. Now, it did go down to the end, and the New England Patriots did prove to be a pretty game squad. And I think we are seeing, Anthony, for our very own eyes, the improvement of Drake May here in year two, a quarterback clearly in development who the New England Patriots hope will eventually be their franchise quarterback. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, he came into the game at the top of a lot of metrics, like from an advanced metric standpoint, EPA per drop back, and the plays that he was making with his arm, with his legs. The athleticism was already intriguing, and then you're starting to see him put more things together, being able to get through his progressions. Still a little skittish at times in putting it together, but you could see the potential and the talent. And then pairing him this year with Josh McDaniels has, I think, elevated his game further. And he came into last week, making some plays, and he made a ton of them in that game. I really think for as much as the Bills kind of threw up all over themselves in a lot of ways and did not play their best game, Drake May just kept making play after play. Like when there was a play to be made, he made it. And most of the time was going to Stephon Diggs. But I mean, just him, Daquan Jones is hanging on him and he's stiffing arm him and finding a way to still flick it out to Diggs. And the whole shot on the last drive where he gets Trey White to hesitate a little bit and then he puts it behind him. Just a really strong game from him. And I'm interested to see what the Patriots look like going forward. If this was more the Bills playing poorly, or if this was more of a statement for the Patriots, like, no, we're going to make some noise this year and see what we can be going forward.
And I'm sure you're trying to channel in from one of the greatest movies of all time, Dodgeball, the American underdog story, where Ben Stiller goes, "No one makes me bleed my own blood." But now that has happened here with the Buffalo Bills. So let's go to our buddy Matt Beauvais on their news station. They did a panic meter coming off of this game, everyone on the panel. And there were some interesting answers. So I'll throw it to you, Anthony, with Buffalo bleeding blood for the very first time. What is your panic meter at this point as we head into the rest of the season?
Really low. I don't even think they're bleeding that much. It's like a paper cut, or they like stub their toe and there's like a little bit of blood. Especially because the things that they didn't execute in this game weren't like their warts or their worries. Like they don't have a very good run defense. The Patriots didn't really run the ball well on them. They actually cleaned up some of their gap integrity stuff. But I mean, again, did they improve, or is it that the Patriots can't run the ball? But if you have a team that can't run the ball and they run the ball on you, it makes that issue even more worse. But I still do think they have some issues between, the disconnect between their rush and coverage. We saw it in this game a bunch. I still do think they have to have an answer for the deep ball on offense, or teams that have good corners are just going to play single high and crowd the box and try and get after the run game and slow it up and make the Bills prove they can win on the outside and, more importantly, win vertically and push it down the field a little bit. But you had some nice emergencies in this game. Dalton Kincaid was a constant mismatch. They should have gone to him more. They didn't get the run game going, but the Patriots also have a really good front. I guess you could be concerned a little bit of, what happens if they face fronts that are that good? Are they going to continue to struggle? But I think the Patriots, they have a good roster on the defensive side of the ball, several studs on the back end and up front. They had the Bills well scouted. This game was more of, I tip my cap to New England more so than like, oh no, like the Bills are in trouble because X, Y, and Z. They have things to clean up for sure, and they have things to tweak, but I don't think this is a panic situation at all yet. I mean, they played horribly by their standards, and they lost by 3. Like, I don't want to pull the silver lining and be like, well, they barely lost, but they literally did barely lose. That game could have easily gone in the Bills' favor, and that was with them committing a multitude of penalties, several uncharacteristic turnovers, and just playing really sloppy football.
Manchild Show with Boy Green Digital at MC Show Digital, talking with Anthony Prohaska. He's our Bills insider. We do this every week with Anthony, breaking down all of the Bills' efforts here. Our broadcast today brought to you by our friends at Crest Cadillac. Let me circle back, Anthony, to Stephon Diggs. You mentioned him there in your opening comments. Revenge game for him. I was wondering, is it really? We talked about it last week. It did turn out to be a revenge game. 2 straight games now where Stephon Diggs has eclipsed 100 yards and is showing some chutzpah. Was this a one-off? Give me your take on Diggs's performance against the Bills.
Man, he looked great. And even going into the tape, we talked last week about, he's still a year removed from that ACL injury, starting to work his way back. The Carolina tape showed that he had some juice to his game, and he was starting to pick up with some foot speed and some burst. He showed more of that against the Bills. They made a concerted effort to get him the ball early. That first play of the game is, fake play action and make it look like he's going to run it over and we're booting across, and then or we're going to go like outside zone with it. And then May boots back. Diggs puts his foot in the ground, whips back outside, made a nice run after catch. He's starting to round more into form. And I think this was the form he had at the end of 2023 when he left the Bills. A lot of Bills fans just kept talking about the big drop that he had against the Chiefs in the divisional round at home, and kept talking about his numbers going down and how he was washed, and that's why Brady wasn't using him. He wasn't washed. He still has had juice to his game. He could still play. He was looking good for Houston last year before he got hurt, and he seems to be getting healthier with each week. They're getting him the ball consistently. He's a good receiver, and he showed that against the Bills. He made a multitude of plays on script and off script. It really was, again, the Bills didn't execute, but it was really Drake May, the run defense, and Stephon Diggs just playing above and getting the Patriots that win.
Anthony, I don't know if you have to cup your hands and yell road trip, but that's what's coming here for the Buffalo Bills. A weird scheduling quirk. 7 of their next 10 games are on the road for the Buffalo Bills. And there is a bye week sprinkled in there too. How do you anticipate your Buffalo Bills handling some of these? Now, the opponent quality, we can debate on some of these games that are coming up here on the docket, but still, going on the road is going on the road in the NFL.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see kind of what they do in this next stretch. I hate the bye week coming as early as it does, week 7 for them. So they play in Atlanta on Monday Night Football this upcoming week, and then they have the bye. I like the bye week a little later in the year, but you get more sample size about who you are and what you are. You're able to course correct coming out of that bye week, potentially rest some guys for a potential playoff run, but early bye week in week 7. And then, I from a road perspective, you come against Carolina. We'll see what happens with Carolina. At least you're home against Kansas City that next week. But I think at Miami might be a little tough again. At Houston, I think could be a little tougher than people want to admit. At Pittsburgh might be a little tough. And then you're at New England. Those are the road games all in order. And then they have some home ones sprinkled in between. But I think it'll be an interesting opportunity for them to prove themselves. Like you said, I think the opponent quality might not be there on paper, but I think schematically it potentially is. And then who knows where we are in week 10 or 11. Several of these teams could have turned it around, and all of a sudden, where Pittsburgh is right now, they could keep rolling, and all of a sudden this is a more important or impactful game. Houston, maybe they build on their victory against Baltimore last week, and they're rolling in hot to that game against the Bills. So it'll be an interesting opportunity considering the teams that they play and the schematic matchups that they present.
Anthony, one of the things the Bills are doing this year, and I don't know why they weren't doing it last year when Dalton Kincaid was on my fantasy football team, is going to the tight ends. Suddenly, the tight ends are part of the offense again. What's going on there? Is this by scheme? Is this because of who they've played? Tell me a little bit about why you think the tight ends are more involved in the Bills' offense this year.
I think it starts with Dalton Kincaid, and I do think, to your point there, I think he would have been more involved in this way last year had he not gotten hurt. He had multiple injuries starting early on that kind of threw a wrench into their plan. I thought he would be the tip of the spear for their offense last year, or for the passing game last year, as he kind of is this year. A lot of it is really just the schematic fit. They have a wide receiver room that fits having an identity where you run the football and you win with alignment and formation, particularly condensed formations and kind of putting defenses into run-pass conflict. But they don't have a wide receiver room that's built for passing it 30 to 40 times a game and airing it out. And so when you go with more of those formations and those alignments and you pair that with the run identity that they have, you end up going into more heavier personnel. They love to run 12. They love to run 21, 22. They've gone with 13 this year because of the emergence of rookie tight end Jackson Hawes. And I think it's just more of putting defenses into that run pass conflict. They can have 2 or 3 tight ends on the field and run through your face, or they can have 2 or 3 tight ends on the field and go play action and get Dalton Kincaid matched up on a linebacker or a safety. And that's a huge advantage for the Bills. Dalton Kincaid, one-on-one with a safety or linebacker, is probably winning that 95, 96% of the time. It just becomes a matter of whether or not you can get that matchup consistently, generate that consistently, and how you tie it in. But yeah, it starts with Kincaid being the mismatch as a pass catcher. Dawson Knox is able to do a little bit as a blocker and as a pass catcher. And then Jackson Haas is just a mauler who can still catch the ball and give you some stuff in the underneath.
All right, let's go back to this here, Anthony. I'm sure you're running out of room on that shelf back there for all the AFC East titles you guys have, 5 in a row. But with New England winning, and, a lot of people, it was a foregone conclusion that Buffalo is going to win the division this year. Are you at all worried on the concern meter that New England, all of a sudden, whoa, this is going to be a lot more competitive than some people thought in the AFC East crown?
Not too tremendously, and they still do have they'll play New England again, so they have the opportunity to kind of get that win back. I think the most interesting thing for New England is their schedule really going forward. Like, it's almost equally as light as the Bills' schedule could be. They play New Orleans this week, then they play Tennessee, then they play Cleveland, Atlanta, Tampa, the Jets, the Bengals, the Giants, bye week, Bills, Ravens, Jets, Dolphins. Not exactly a murderer's row type of schedule. And you could make the case, if they're rolling hot, like, they could get on a pretty significant win streak or put together a significant win total going into that bye week. Realistically, I think maybe if you wanted to play it positively for New England, going from this week 16 to week 13, maybe they lose 2 games, maybe they lose 3. There's a chance, if you want to tell me they only lose 1, I could buy into that. So we'll see kind of how for real they are. I don't think we're going to find out until once we get into November there, because these next couple of games against New Orleans, Tennessee, Cleveland's defense is super real, but their offense is kind of finding their footing. But no, I'm not too worried right now, especially knowing that the Bills have another game against the Pats coming up, and what they've had. If they had lost both of them, I'd be scared.
Manchild Show with Boy Green Digital. We're talking with Anthony Prohaska, Cover One. He's our Bills insider. Today's broadcast brought to you by our friends at Crest Cadillac. Don't forget to like our video, hit the little thumbs up, and of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel at MC Show Digital. Let's just take 30 seconds. When we come back, we're going to talk about unis again. Back in the news with the Bills, uniforms. I don't know. It seems to be a fashion show lately. Right after this.
Cadillac certified pre-owned vehicles, exclusively available in Central New York at your participating Cadillac dealer, Crest Cadillac. Each one must meet high standards and receives a 172-point inspection, along with a 1-year unlimited mile warranty after the original warranty expires. Come into Crest Cadillac in Syracuse today for exceptional offers on Cadillac certified pre-owned models. CrestCadillac.com.
All right, back on the Manchild Show with Boy Green Digital, talking inside the Bills with Anthony Prohaska of Cover One. Anthony, uniforms, fashion, dare I say, has been in the fold for the Buffalo Bills, it seems, week in and week out. We just saw their rivalry uniforms, which had like the frozen tundra kind of look to them, and the all white and the silver. But we go right back at it here. Monday Night Football against the Falcons. We'll talk about the game, but let's start with the fashion first. The Falcons going with the throwback red helmets with the black jerseys, and the Bills going with there's a name for them. They call them the Standing Buffalo uniforms. This is the helmet with the red buffalo on it that's white, and then the white jersey. So let's talk about the unis and the fashion that the Bills are throwing out these days.
I want to start with the Falcons first, just quickly. Like, I love this Falcons combo. I really like those, the Michael Vick, Scott Chandler Falcons uniforms, the Jamal Anderson ones. Like, I thought those were so good. But then with the red helmet from the 80s, it's just so much better. That's an elite tier uniform combo. I like the Bills one too. It's pretty similar to kind of where they are now, minus the standing buffalo on the helmet, which is a much different type of look. And then the piping, the blue and white striping and piping that you have on the sleeves there. So I like it. I think the Bills have a nice, clean uniform, kind of whatever they're doing, the current ones or the throwbacks. The currents are still kind of in the same vein as the throwbacks, so there are some similarities there, but it's all good and it's all clean. I wish the Bills had the 90s uniform incorporated in. I don't know why we're not doing, I know we are at the end of the year, but I think that needs to be incorporated more. And I like all the 90s uniforms. The Buccaneers creamsicles, the Kelly Green Eagles jerseys. The Seahawks Bucks game last week was amazing.
Oh, yeah.
That could have been the worst football game ever. It could have been 3-0. I was locked in because of the uniform. It just looked so good. Yeah, this is going to be another one too with the Bills and these classic Falcons unis.
So salute to those. I can't wait. I really love the Falcons ones as well. Those are phenomenal. Let's get an injury report, Doctor. Ed Oliver has been MIA since the Jets game, a while back. So, interesting. What is his current status? And is there any other expected returnees or even bad news that you have to share?
Ed Oliver still listed as questionable. You got TJ Sanders being questionable. Dorian Williams is still questionable. Milano played and looked really good when he was out there against New England, but then aggravated his pec injury. Now he's kind of week to week. Dorian Strong, their rookie corner who was getting some time at corner 2 with Trey White, was placed on injured reserve with a neck injury. He might essentially be done for the year. Doesn't look like Milano's going to play this week. Ed Oliver, maybe. I think the biggest thing with Ed Oliver is do you want to play him this week knowing that you get the rest week next week in the bye? And it's like, okay, we can play him, see how it goes, and rest him anyway. Or do you use that same argument and not want to risk him at all, knowing you have the bye week? It's like, let's just give him another 2 weeks and kind of let him rock. So
where would you lean in that?
Oh, Atlanta's run game is good. And Bijan Robinson is awesome. And Algiers a sweet number 2, and they've got some good offensive linemen up front that can move. I would rest him. Then just go with it as is, unless he's like that close that it's complete. If there's like a hair of, I still feel a little, then you're done. Like that's it. But if he feels like, no, I'm good to go, there's no setbacks, everything's been rolling, we've been building up to this moment, I'm fine. But if he's like 95% or lower, I'm not even going to risk it. Let him rock into the bye. But my only concern there is just because they got some firepower on that Falcons offense. And I know Penix has been a little inconsistent, but they've got weapons. They've got a good run game. The Bills' run defense is very suspect, and it's hard to just continue to rotate with the injuries they've had up there. Sanders going down, Ogunjobi being suspended. Dwayne Carter didn't play good last year, but he was defensive tackle 5. He's been out for the year since the start. They went into this game against New England with essentially like defensive tackle 6 or 7 or 7 or 8, depending on how you're looking at it on the depth chart. That's a hard way to live, especially against a team that can run the ball like the Falcons.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about Bijan. I mean, he's obviously a terrific runner. They are getting him the ball out of the backfield in the passing game a lot too, Anthony. How do the Bills handle backs out of the backfield, and what do you think their game plan will be against Bijan, who is multifaceted, obviously?
So they get very deep in their coverage depth, and you see teams check the ball down to their running backs or check it down underneath, and the Bills will come up and make a tackle, and okay, it goes from 1st and 10 to 2nd and 6 or 2nd and 5. But if you give too much space to a check down to Bijan, it can go. It's like, it's like 2nd and 5 and 2nd or 6, and it's a new set of downs because he made one guy miss and he ran off for 11 or 12 or 13 yards. He is so electric. And then from a man coverage perspective, they'll lock the backside of coverages. If there's a 3-by-1, and they'll play man coverage on the wide receiver, and then they'll play man with their linebacker on the back. And that linebacker is probably going to be Shaq Thompson. Shaq Thompson versus Bijan Robinson. That's a big advantage for Bijan. Even Terrell Bernard man coverage against Bijan would be an issue. I look for them to get Bijan involved early and often. Baltimore did that pretty good in their game in Baltimore last year, using Justice Hill in the pass game to create some mismatches with the Bills linebackers. I look for the Falcons to do that with Bijan because of how electric and amazing he is as a player. And with the Bills being banged up at that second level, knowing their coverage tendencies as well, I look for him to he could easily have like 8 catches for 60 yards or 8 catches for 90 to 100 if he breaks 1 or 2 and then takes off.
Anthony, let's get weird. We've been pretty familiar with one another, so it's time to get a little strange. How is it different for a defense facing a left-handed quarterback and Michael Penix Jr.? Because as a matter of fact, if you look at the Bills' schedule, they play every single left-handed starting quarterback that's in the NFL this year, in Tua, Penix, and Dylan Gabriel, who just got the job in Cleveland. So they're going to be playing all of those guys this season. You gave the face. Again, I said we're getting weird, man.
I didn't realize
that I would have paid attention to that weird sort of fun fact. But how is that different for a defense when you're facing against that kind of a quarterback?
It may change your rush plan a little bit, knowing that the typical backside of the quarterback is the left tackle side, but that's obviously the front side of the quarterback because they're lefty. With the Bills, it's interesting because Greg Rousseau traditionally, if you're looking at it from the offense's vantage point, Greg Rousseau typically lines up against your right tackle. So against most quarterbacks, he's going through the face of the quarterback. But against lefties, he has the opportunity to kind of be that, blindside type of rusher and get some more opportunities off the edge, which is nice as he started to get healthier. He had a really nice game last week. So maybe you see some more pressure opportunities or sack opportunities for him if he can collapse the pocket, compress those tackles and kind of get through, especially knowing that one of those QBs, potentially as of now is Dylan Gabriel. Is he still starting by that time in the year? If he is, he's still a rookie. You got the opportunity to maybe take advantage a little bit there. But I really think from more than anything, it changes your rush standpoint and, maybe where his eyes start in the progression. If a quarterback is more comfortable throwing to their left than their right, you get your defense's right getting worked on more than the defense's left. So kind of knowing where their eyes go in conjunction with being a lefty versus a righty.
I got one for you outside the box here a little bit, Anthony.
All right. Counter it. Let's go.
I like this. This is fun.
I'm a diehard Giants fan. And while I love talking about the Bills and the Jets and all the other things we talk about, like any fan, I want to see my team get back to being relevant, and we're not right now. Other than the Jets, we're among the worst teams in all of football.
Hell?
With only one win.
Oh,
you're the only team without a win.
Thanks for pointing that out.
Stray shot, caught a stray.
Sorry. But Brian Daboll, let's talk about it, because I was excited when Daboll came. I was excited when Joe Shane joined him. I was excited about the prospects of what they helped build in Buffalo. Now, I know Sean McDermott, was at the very head of that snake, and, and Brandon Beane, is at the head of that snake. I know these are tertiary guys. These were not the leaders, but they were in leadership rooms. They were experiencing leadership stuff. And now they're with the Giants, and I have been keeping the faith. I am a big believer in continuity, and the Bills are living proof of continuity these days. In the NFL with the longevity of their staff and how they've held together. So should I still believe? What do you know about Brian Daboll as being a Bills fan for those years that he was with the Bills that I can hang my hat on? And what do you know that says maybe you ought to worry a little bit? Maybe this isn't the right combo to bring your team back to the promised land. Let's talk about that.
Oh, good question. When he left, I'm a big fan of continuity as well. And when he left, their offense was flying, passing the ball, and Allen was developing, and they had weapons, and they were putting points on the board. And he goes to the Giants for that first year, and you get that magical playoff run. You're in the final, the Final Four in the NFC. Yeah, big surprise. They lost to Philly in the divisional round, right?
The Vikings. I was like, wow, it's impressive.
And it's like, okay, see what you kind of get. And it's like, then they pay Daniel Jones. It's like, let's see what we can get from Daniel Jones. And that didn't really work out. But then you see and this is tying into what worries me a little. That didn't work out. And it's like, well, Daniel Jones is terrible, right? And then he goes to Minnesota for a little bit, cup of coffee, he's the backup. And then he wins the job in Indy. And it's like, oh, well, this is terrible because Daniel Jones sucks. And then it's like, oh, Daniel Jones actually looks pretty good with Indy. And then it's like, is that an indictment on Daboll? And I know Russell Wilson wasn't great last year and didn't look great this year, but he looked much better than he was in this offense this year. And I think what's interesting is it seems like whatever they run on offense, and that's where Daboll's bread and butter is. He is an former OC, offensive coordinator, at Bama with the Bills, obviously, his time on the offensive side with the Patriots back in the day, and not seeing really any semblance of identity start to develop. Or consistency at the quarterback spot. When Daboll left, I thought he was the type of guy that you could just take a below average quarterback and he could make him average with the scheme and you'd be fine.
Right.
Now, some of that I do think is on the guys they brought in, but at some point you have to point the finger at Daboll with the consistent inconsistencies they've had on the offensive side. Now, to play devil's advocate, their offensive line has been consistently banged up the past couple of years. It's tough when you have one of the best left tackles in football and Andrew Thomas, and it can't stay healthy a bit. And then the interior has been messed up for a little bit. They're starting to get healthier there. And then now Neighbors goes down for the year. But they do have talent on this team. And if they just continue to struggle like this with the money they've spent on the defensive side of the ball, with the guys that they brought in, they have one of the best fronts in all of football.
No question.
Yeah, even Bobby Okereke, is a good linebacker, and he's playing behind just a stud group up front. You pay Paulson Adebo, you pay Javon Holland, big-time free agent moves. Like, you've reinforced that defensive side. The defense has been fine, and the offense just can't seem to put it together, which also makes me think, okay, Shane is doing a good job ID and talent and bringing guys in. I was more upset to lose Shane. No disrespect to Dable. I was more upset to lose Joe Shane because he was Brandon Beane's right hand. And you never really know, how much is he in Beane's ear about we should draft this guy. We should sign this guy. He was big in the personnel aspect, the player development piece and identification. And I think
Shane drafted very well, Anthony.
Yes,
he has very well.
He's continued to find success there with the guys that they brought in, but they're not putting it together on the field. I think a lot of signs, despite the injuries, despite the inconsistencies at quarterback, a lot of it just seems to point to Dable, where they're just constantly stuck in the mud and things feel sluggish and ugly. And it doesn't really feel like they have a true identity. And I know a lot of that is tied to the QB, but you knew that first year where they go to the playoffs, granted they had Saquon, it was like, we're just going to go heavy with a lot of tight ends. We're going to make it ugly. We're going to run the ball, and then we'll go play action and do a lot of non-sexy stuff, but it'll work. And that was a big feather for Dable. It was like, wow, imagine what he can get as things get better, and everything has gotten worse. The talent on the defensive side has gotten better. The offense keeps getting worse. Granted, the offensive line has been banged up. They don't re-sign Saquon, all these pieces. But and I know it goes with Spags and what the Kansas City defense does, but like, you couldn't get Neighbors that ball at all in that Kansas City game for the first 2.5 quarters.
Screaming at the TV, please just throw him a screen, put him on a bubble, let him run a reverse, just give him the ball.
Just something. And especially too, like when Tracy got banged up, and Tracy was looking good. They were running the ball. Tracy looked good, and I know Scadaboo can do some things as well. But I really do like Tracy, and I think he's a good running back. But you have one of the most electric players in football in Malik Neighbors. Exactly to your point, even if it's like, they're bracketing him and there's two. So give him a bubble. Do something. You got to get him the ball. He's your best player, arguably, maybe him and Andrew Thomas on that side. And then he's your best weapon, especially with Tracy going down. That was a big one for me where I was really just like, you can't design something. You can't call something. Or if he's really getting that much attention, you can't use that and open up an area somewhere else. It just feels like everything is very stagnant and everything is very sluggish with Dable and this offense. No matter who they bring in, what the combination is, what the season is, it's just really, it's ugly football to watch, and it's really disappointing.
Yeah, I'm starting to lose faith, and that's and I'm a very steadfast guy, so I think it's a sign, and because I know there are other Giant fans out there like me, and we just see things like that, and just like, what is Brian Dable doing? Where is the leadership when we need it, kind of thing. So I don't want to spend a whole segment talking about the Giants, but I really wanted some insight, and that was a deep question, and I got a very, very deep answer. Thank you for that, Anthony. I appreciate it. Go ahead, Boy Green.
Yeah. And I'm sure we'll get this even more when we're getting even closer to this. I don't know what your shopping budget looks like, Anthony Prohaska, whether that's Christmas or on a grocery week-to-week thing, but the NFL trade deadline is coming up, and I don't know if Bills fans have been writing letters to Santa about what they would like under their proverbial tree. Are there some targets that Bills fans and Bills analysts like yourself that have sort of said, hey, if we could get one of these or one of these, that'd be pretty nice? Has there been any of those kind of conversations yet ahead of the trade deadline?
For Bills fans, yeah, they've already been looking towards it. There's a lot of clamoring for a wide receiver, a corner, maybe even a defensive tackle. But the big two are wide receiver and corner. I would say wide receiver trumps most. And a lot of fans are looking at New Orleans and want Chris Olave or Rashid Shaheed. Just speed threats, deep guys. Olave can do a bit more than that, but they want verticality in this offense. I am also in that boat. I would like speed. I think Shaheed is awesome, but I don't think he's going to crack the top of the depth chart enough. So if you're putting him in there, it's almost like a tendency giveaway, like, oh, here comes the guy we're going to throw deep to, and then the defense is like, oh, all right, well, he's just going to run deep, so let's cover the guy who runs deep. Olave, I think you can do much more and have him function as a top 3 type of wide receiver in your offense. So every time he's out there, it's not a signal that he's going to run deep. And I also think he's, with everything that's gone on in New Orleans, the injuries, the inconsistency of quarterback, he's been really underutilized. I still think he's a quality receiver. I would like that. I think this offense needs more verticality from the top of the depth chart. They need speed. They need guys who can burn. Palmer can get deep a little bit with stem work and deception, but he's not a real take the top off the defense kind of guy. I would like them to add that. I would like them also, if they can, get yourself a corner to potentially rent, depending on what's happening with Max Hairston. He should be coming back from that knee injury, but like we talked about a couple weeks ago, he might not. Like, he might not play this year, which is really disappointing. And then Dorian Strong's on IR. Trey White, I don't think has been as bad as fans are making him out to be, but you need reinforcements at that corner spot, but not someone you're going to commit to long-term because you just spent a first on Max Hairston. So whoever you bring in is going to play second fiddle to Max next year. So if they can get a corner rental, some kind of vet, like what they did with Rasul Douglas a couple years ago, but more somebody who's on an expiring contract or wants to win a title, and isn't necessarily like looking to make a name or cash in big, and they're going to want a ton of snaps. So it's a little murky and muddy at that corner spot, but I would take a reinforcement there if possible for some depth, and then a wide receiver to really get to the top of the depth chart and potentially affect the vertical game and add some weapons there.
All right, last one for me, Anthony, and that is Keon Coleman. So you're talking about all these receivers, you didn't bring his name up, and I'm not surprised you didn't. I really thought we'd see a pop this year. We've seen some small signs. Is he at this point a disappointment? Is he just a player in development? Give me your take currently on where Keon Coleman stands in this offense.
And just to add to that, Anthony, before you answer, also address the discipline issues that apparently have been happening with Keon Coleman during his career.
Yeah. He was spectacular in college. That's why I just expected more already. Go ahead.
No, he had an issue last year. I don't think it's anything too severe. I don't think he's doing anything crazy. Knowing Sean McDermott and how strict he is, like a lot of, I didn't dismiss it, but to me it was probably like he was late for a meeting or he was late for a walkthrough or something like that. Like he got benched for the entire first quarter of the Jags game last year. Which didn't end up mattering because they were up like 21-0 for the first quarter. But he gets benched for the first series this game. I am somewhat concerned on that. Like if it is a maturity aspect, granted McDermott runs a tight ship, but we don't really see or hear a lot of this from other guys. So I think that is something to kind of watch, but I don't think it's too much of a fire right now. Aside from that, I think he's had good progress in his career this year. We talked about coming out of the New Orleans game, several really good releases in that game, several really good moves at the top of his break, like getting open. He had a really nice catch towards crunch time against New England. Back shoulder throw goes over Carlton Davis and brings it in. I think the biggest issue with him is he's still very much, like you said, Jim, like he's in development, and it's a wide development because of how raw and green he is. And he really is traits more than a finished product. Yep. So every week is important. Every practice rep is important. Every game. He needs a lot of time on task to develop, especially because his skill set is being a big power forward and essentially scraping rebounds off the glass. Like that's awesome. That's a hard way to live in the NFL. It's hard to be a contested catch guy consistently with how good NFL secondaries are. So you have to improve your releases, your stem work, your breaks, your routes in general. And that's where he needs development. And I think he's still working towards that. I think he made progression and strides as a rookie, especially considering he got hurt. I think he's looked better this year from the technical aspects of wide receiver than he did last year. They just need to keep getting him that time on task. And, I get really leaning into his skill set, which is nice, but there are some limitations there. But I think it's par for the course because he's got to develop. We're not going to know who Keon Coleman is until like year 4 of Keon Coleman's career. And I don't think that might be annoying for fans, but that's who he is. If you take a ball of clay, the ball of clay doesn't turn into a finished product in a year. It takes several, and that's the type of player and prospect that he is.
Just in time to get paid.
Right? That's exactly
my thing, right? You want to get the most out of those cheap years because then they get paid, right? And then you're like, you really want to keep this guy at this
That
number?
will be the type of like Bill's thing where like the first 3 years, it's like, should they keep him? And then that 4th year, he balls out to the point it's like, well, now they can't afford to keep him because someone's going to pay him.
You're going to pay him.
Yeah.
Right.
He's really the way I've always described him, and I'm still going to describe him this way because he was my wide receiver 9 coming out in that draft class 2 years ago. And I thought he had the widest range of outcomes. If you would have told me he was out of the league in 4 years, I would have believed it. Yep. If you would have told me he was a solid wide receiver 2 in 4 years, I believe it. If you told me that he was that guy who kept getting contracts into his early 30s, but they were all 1-year deals because all these teams were like, you know what? We can be the ones to finally tap into that skill set. I believe it. He has such a wide array of outcomes, but you got to give that time to kind of see what it's going to be. And if he gets in his own way with disciplinary stuff or with injury stuff, that's only going to muddy this situation in this picture even further.
Yeah, he's very, very intriguing. I had him on a lot of my fantasy football lists. I didn't roster him on any of my teams, and I'm glad I didn't. But I was, I'm titillated by him a little bit. But I don't know.
Need him. They need him to
project. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a project, but they need him. He offers them an element like that ball winning element is something that no one else has. And because on this roster, and because they don't have a ton of speed or a ton of verticality, they need to lean into the skill sets that they have. And Palmer's is, separating underneath and in the intermediate, and Coleman's is being a power forward. And so they need him to win that way. But in order to win that way, he has to improve on the technical aspects of wide receiver. And yeah, so it's still very much a work in progress. I think he's made strides, and I think he has progressed. He just needs to continue to stay on top of everything and really start to refine and smooth out some of those rough edges.
All right. Thank you, Anthony Prohaska. Bills Monday night back in prime time against the Atlanta Falcons. It's the early game of another one of those double headers we'll all be watching. Talk to you again next week, Anthony.
Thank you for having me. Enjoy the rest of your day.